Grandma is back and she doesn't take any sass. My great-grandmother's Faded Frontier Oracle deck is back in print, and I am so excited to walk through the second edition with you. I wasn't planning on bringing this deck back into print after the initial run of 100 copies. I received so many requests and questions regarding the deck's status that after a while, I seriously considered what it could look like if it came back into print for good. Meet the second edition. Great Grandmother's Faded Frontier now is in its truest form, all thanks to the loving support and feedback from her first limited run. If you don't know about the background of this deck, I created 30 collages on my great-grandmother's polaroids after she had passed in 2015. So in 2017, I did a series of 30 collages, and I took her original photos and took one piece of paper, one cutout, and pasted it onto that photo, placing my story onto her story. And it was this really cool juxtaposition where the old and new is merging into something cohesive, into one story. While I don't have the original 30 collages, I do have 10 new ones I created for the second edition. The first series of collages was created almost 10 years ago, and I ended up selling those in a gallery show. And of course, those were created for the intention of just creating a body of work, a series of collage work. And that's what I always did for over 10 years. I created these large bodies of collage work for art's sake, only for art's sake. So last year when I was looking at my old work and I had all the scans of these collages, I thought, wow, this could be a really cool experiment to see how my pre-existing collage work translates into an oracle deck. Of course, I really had no idea how that would go, not using my pre-existing work before, let alone my analog collage, because I am wary of the fact and cautious of the fact that I do not own the rights to these paper cutouts. At the end of the day, no matter what, I do not have the commercial rights. So I prefer using digital assets and working digitally with my collage for products that I'm offering for sale because I have the license, I have the rights to earn a wage from that. But I decided to tiptoe in the gray zone that is selling analog collage art. So here we are. I figured it would be best to flip through these together and we can see the new cards added and any other changes. And then we'll get into a bunch of pairings at the end since I absolutely love pairing decks. So the second edition features this 2-part rigid box, which the top and bottom does loosen up and become easier to open. I know the first time or two opening this, it is a little stiff, but it does loosen up. Unfortunately, thumb holes were not an option in this template. What I really love about this box is the ephemera on the back along with a couple of the cards. And then my most favorite part is this postcard here, and it might be hard to catch on camera. Come down to Grandma's Sunday. I just thought that was so clever and cute for the box. In the limited first run, we have this gorgeous cotton bag. I absolutely love this emblem I made. It does find itself again on the back of the little booklet in the second edition. This is very much reminiscent of my childhood home. And in the first edition, we have these cards for the meanings. In the second edition, we have this little zine booklet here that has the same design as the original cards, now just in one place. There was some minor edits to the text, but everything pretty much holds the same still. So like I said, we have 10 new cards in this second edition here. Of course, I would have loved to make more cards, more artwork, but I only have a very limited number of my great grandmother's Polaroids, and not all of them work for artwork in this way. So I made the absolute maximum that I could. I really pushed for more, but the final two just were not coming together and working out, and it felt forceful. It just didn't feel right. So we have 30 cards and 40 cards. These are a poker size, and they are printed at different printers with different die lines. I didn't think they would be the same size, but they're pretty close. Different radiuses on the corner rounding, and just a smidge hair of a size difference. This one's printed a little cooler. This one's printed a little warmer. I did go in the second edition artwork and do a lot of photo retouching and editing to enhance colors, brighten colors, sharpen things up, blur things down. Like, there was just a lot of futzing that happened here. No keywords changed across the original 30 cards. And nothing significant changed in the artwork either. Like I said, I just did some photo retouching, so I did remove a couple little areas that bothered me in the original artwork. Most of these photos came from my grandparents' travel to Canada and across the United States. So there is a mix of landscapes and scenarios happening in here, but it is very down to earth, homegrown, outdoor nature vibes here. And that's why I love my addition of these paper cutouts to really change up the story and the context. Now here we can see one of the new cards. I really honed in on a bit of unique phrasing, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek phrasing, while I kept things neutral, as in I didn't go in with the intention to make any of this feel overly sassy or attitude-driven. It did kind of just find its own personality once it went out into the wild. Here's another new card here. This is a good example of just where I went in and brightens up some areas, gave a little more contrast in some areas. Another new card. I also just find it hilarious that these are my family members. They're in there. I do really love that one especially. So this is really just a celebration of the everyday, of the average person, of the regular life. Here's another new card. My great-grandparents were alive until I was in my late 20s, so they were in my life. So I saw them at family gatherings and holidays and birthdays and things like that. We went over to their place. So I knew them in that way as a young child, but nothing beyond that. So it's really cool to put my own spin onto my great-grandmother's photos here, and I'm sure she probably wouldn't appreciate some of it. Here's one where I photoshopped out this little blip of the water here that always kind of bugged me in the original collage. And just to make that less of an eye distraction, I removed that. I always really love this card with that large butterfly landing on that cave-like structure. I really imagine this deck just living out on the dirt road, out off the grid somewhere. Very limited amenities, very humble living, and that's really the dirt and dust of the vibe that I feel this world is. This is one of my favorite paper cutouts ever. I have a stash of materials from 15 plus years, and I have moved it from house to house, state to state. Used it in many different jobs and personal projects, and some of these on these cards are some of my favorite pieces I have hung onto. This one, I cleaned up the image a little bit and brightened them up, added a bit more contrast. Some of these changes are very subtle. Here is another new card here. I really love this sort of like off-road rally here. Feels very like down and dirty, enjoying the outdoors and stirring up some hell. This card is one I've had some questions on before. I believe this is at the border of Canada and the US. I really loved the idea of hand and the dentures. Made me think of like gritting and bearing it, nodding and smiling, like kind of getting through the interaction a little bit of like when you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, you know? And what it takes to just be a bigger person and just getting through a situation or an interaction is where I went with that. As you can see, though, the same old grandma is hanging in there, doing her thing. Here is another new card. Of course, I love all things desserts, all things snacks, all things junk food. And another new card. And we're back to the original mix here. This one is just cracking me up. I was trying to find a place for this screw through a handful of different photos, and finally I stuck it like it's coming out of this car trunk, and I'm like, that's it, that's the one. This one's so sweet. Another new card, another new food item. I absolutely love vintage food. Visually is so delightful to me, and then applying it to these very obscure locations where food probably wouldn't normally be, I love it. Here we are with another new card. And we are back to the rotation of the original cards here. I just really enjoy the mix of imagery and objects and landscapes and the keywords. They just really fill this familial world for me where there's some good, there's some bad, there's some humor, there's some everyday, and there's just existing. And there's just a truth in that. And I feel like this mixes in fantasy with truth. And I feel like that's a really amazing balance in artwork. All right, a few more here. This one I always enjoyed, especially as someone who can be a crier. And the last cards, of course, the card backs are also the same design. So I figured that we could look through some pairings now. I have about 9 or so pairings to show you. Ooh, 9, my favorite number. And we are going to look at a mix of collage decks with this because I feel like it's its most natural fit. And then we are going to look at some photography-based deck pairings as well because I feel like that's its second best fit visually. Of course, this deck can pair with so many different other styles and themes. It doesn't have to be in what I stick it in with these pairings. This is just what speaks best to me in my collection and what I would go for first. But I love finding new pairings that I see from you all because I just don't have all the decks either, you know? So should we just do a little shuffle and then we'll do a quick flip of these pairings because I could be here forever with pairings. I already cut some out that I will give a shout out to. With all of these pairings, I think you could easily mix and match, add other decks to this. This is just going to be the simplest and cleanest way to show you these pairings. My first thought was to try the Frau Grand Duchess Tarot. Now, this is one I trimmed, even though I absolutely love that chain border. It's really cute, but I felt like I really wanted to hone in on the visuals more, so I chopped it off. This one has a lot of different everyday people featured, and it felt like a really natural fit for the time periods that these cross over. It also is a very simplified collage style, a lot of bigger shapes. So my single cutouts really balance well with the additional layers that the tarot has. Colors also play beautifully together. And we're getting the balance of the white borders with the white title bars as well. I could really see this working awesome in a larger spread. I just adore the visuals and the messages that come through here. Of course, you can always double up the tarot and only have one oracle or add more of each. I just felt that visually this felt the most cohesive for the spread here. Absolutely love this. I thought the Ephemeral Tarot was pretty cool. It goes a bit more fantasy and art in terms of all its fantastical colors and textures and layers and imagery used where the great grandmother's is very simple and very everyday, there is a good balance of that reality versus fantasy. And I feel like they balance each other out fairly well. Same with the previous pairing. I think the colors and the time period of the imagery that's used feels cohesive and nothing feels too jarring in terms of these distinctly different and clashing eras of imagery. It really feels like it can still live in a same world, build from a similar story, and I really love that. Once again, you could probably add in multiple decks I am going to show into one big pairing here. I think they all play very nicely with one another. A lot of my collage decks looked great in this format right here, with great grandmothers and a collage deck in the center here. I'm going to show a few more examples. I could have shown like 5 more examples, but just for time's sake, I'm giving you a taster of some that I think are really cool together. I thought the Abaton Keys was an interesting one. It's probably one that might be the most jarring in terms of time frame of imagery used. And sometimes it can feel a little clashy to me like this, but I think it still could work. I really was trying to put this together with Coastal Curiosities in the mix because I feel like it's a great neutralizer between the different styles here. You know, even if we were to place something like here and here, right? Like, I think it all starts to work together even more. Personally, I feel like these two I really need to use together because the colors are just looking fabulous across there. But I think there's something here I didn't necessarily figure out for the video, but I thought there was a very strong potential with the 3. Now that I've made a bit of a mess here, we'll just do a couple more flips. I think it could totally work. Like I said, it's not 100% there for me. Like, I love this one across. Some of them hit, some of them don't for me. And I really try to show pairings that are hitting like 9 out of 10 times for me instead of like 6 out of 10 times or whatever, you know. But it's all in the eye of the beholder. I thought it was still a really great one to share. This is the Flower Oracle by Broccoli. I feel like you could probably swap out any of the Broccoli decks. I feel like the flower one fits the theme the best with the great grandmother's deck. My great grandmother loved flowers, and I definitely think of the land, the nature, plants when I think of her. There's also so much landscape in these Polaroids here that it felt even more of a natural fit to select this one to do the pairing with. But once again, it could totally work with probably any of them, really. I think also the Earth Oracle that I recently showed on my channel works really well. I did test that as a pairing. I just had to eliminate some to save on time. Even this is interesting with the hands both facing from each direction, and then a watch which lives on the wrist. That's kind of interesting here. So I'm really enjoying these two. I think you could swap in a couple of the photography based decks that we're going to look at next, and they would also work fabulously in a bigger patchwork style spread. The Terra Incognita I thought was genius with this because it brings this level of the magical, of the unseen, of that whole vibe to my very mundane, everyday imagery that we're seeing in Great Grandmothers. And it adds this level of mystery to the cards. The photography also plays really great off of the photographs in the Great Grandmothers, and I just love the unusual keywords in this deck here, and I think it adds another layer to the phrases in the Grandmothers. It almost acts as that transitional message, that in between, that to from, the through, the with. And I think if you were to read it straight across, there would be some interesting messages found in these two decks as well. Once again, it plays into the nature theme, which goes perfectly with the landscapes here. And then we're getting that abstraction, that sort of surreal fantasy with the way the cutouts are placed in the photos and the way that these plants are photographed and zoomed in on and really show the textures and the unusual shapes in this. I love the Mountain Dream as a pairing because you're bringing in that photography visual style and visual language to pair with the Polaroids. The people and the time frame also sync up rather well with their great grandmothers, and then the limited color palette of the tarot also balances nicely with some of these bolded yet muted colors of the great grandmothers. Okay, when I do these bigger spreads, I normally don't do a little stack to pull from. It's slippery, but let's look at it a couple times. It has this great ancestral feel to me. I feel like I'm looking back at past family photos. And while I am, in some case, in half of the case, I really am, but it feels more than that. It feels different. It feels like something beyond a photo album. It feels slightly otherworldly, and maybe it's just because of these 3 tarot cards, this floating wallet and key and rose here. There's something here that's just really speaking to me on a spirit and everyday level. But I'm thoroughly enjoying this pairing. And shout out to Aldana over at Elements of Tarot for selling me the Mountain Dream Tarot that I had been after. And I love it. And look at, I have an amazing pairing for it. So couldn't have worked out any better. Yeah, these are really cool and they feel deep. And I want to explore this more. This feels like something that's going, talk to us, Lennox. Let's figure out some more with this. Okay, love these two. How about the Somnia Tarot, the Tree Whispers Oracle, and the Great Grandmothers? I was really liking their photography vibe here. The Great Grandmothers really brings some humor and oddity to the spread and to the visuals. Let's pull and look at a couple examples without getting too sloppy here. I feel like they're all circling around something similar, yet are bringing something different. And I think that's what's intriguing me the most about it. We're almost getting this 3-layer look where the Somnia is almost the thing that's zoomed out. That's like the bigger story, the bigger picture. The Great Grandmothers is more of that center middle part of the scene. We can see the details, and that's the action that's happening present. That's the action that's happening right then and there. And then the Tree Whispers is almost the foreground that's super zoomed in. So we're getting this macro view of some nature detail, which we do get the nature elements in the other 2 decks. So there's something there for me with this, and I'm really looking forward to exploring what this could be more of, because there's some interesting visuals to pull from, and then especially in a way you want to read this as well. Because you know me with my sort of free flow narrative reading styles. I mean, you could really read these in columns and have the grandmas be more of a clarifier, have grandmas be more of a stand on its own, allow the tarot to push the narrative, grandmas with the feeling, Tree Whispers with the actionable takeaway. I mean, there's like so many ways you could divvy this up and read it through. Let's look at one more set here. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's like how I talked about in my deck pairing video, where there's these topics that I pair my decks around, right? We have theme, narrative, tone, the world it lives in, the messages, the way they speak to each other. And I feel like visually, like they work. I don't know if it's a 100% like I am so obsessed, like these are so perfect for each other, but they do feel like they can live in a similar world. I think with all of these pairings, I'm playing with this juxtaposition of fantasy and reality, grounded versus the magical, and so on and so on, right? Like there's always these sort of like gives and takes. And this one does that for me. It's really feels the most intriguing visually to me. And then the way that I broke down how I'm seeing this world and these layers of 3, I'm just feeling like it's bursting with like a story to tell. And lastly, something that's similar to the last set of decks we just looked at. While keeping with the Somnia and the Great Grandmothers, we have now added in the Gentle Chaos Pocket Oracle, and I love the vintage photography nature of this deck. I have curated it down into a set of 40 cards out of, I think, the 49 cards to make a more cohesive photo-based deck that I think goes really well with the Somnia and the great grandmothers. So as we can see that these all play in that theme of nature again. We have these muted color palettes, but they still have these pops of these golden warm tones. We're even getting in some of these cooler tones here. And the gentle chaos brings in that everyday, that average reality, but it feels more magical and mystical in the way that it's cropped, in the way that it's edited, the titles with it, and then paired with the grandmas, it does feel a bit more reality plus. Like it's a one layer out of reality, like 1 foot in reality, 1 foot out of reality. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. And then of course, then mixed with the Somnia's world, it almost is feeling like we're in this sort of give and take of this liminal space, this transitional period or this transitioning. It feels that, and I really like the storytelling aspect that these decks can really build and bring. And I think that's always what I'm going for in my deck pairings. I like to build worlds. I like to build stories. Well, I don't necessarily like to build stories as in writing, but I like to build visual stories that then I can pull messages from, right? Through the artwork, through the visuals, through all of those elements that art has to offer us. And I think Great Grandmother's Faded Frontier is one of those decks that ends up pairing with a lot and a lot more than you would originally think. I feel like I always feel that way about my decks, that they feel like they can stand on their own, and that because they can stand on their own, that sometimes it feels like initially it may be difficult to pair with. But then once you actually start pairing, it comes alive and it starts speaking with the other decks, and it quickly becomes so adaptable into the other decks' visual world surrounding it. And that's just what's so great about Grandmas. We get to put the old with the new and turn it into something that speaks to us. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things about artwork, how we can transform something's context or original intent. And that's also another cool thing about decks as well. The artwork becomes the message. And while that's how I've always naturally read and created artwork long before I even was able to read tarot, the artwork tells a story. And that's the exciting thing about using my pre-existing artwork that was a way to connect with my family without actually connecting with my family. Was a way to work through family and the idea of family, and now to turn it into this and to have other people excited about my work and work that was personal, not only in its materials used, but in the reason how I ended up creating this body of work, is just surreal. And I'm constantly surprised and encouraged and motivated to continue on, because connecting with you all through artwork, through decks, is the most rewarding experience I have encountered in my creative career. And I just wouldn't be here without your support. So thank you so much for being here for me. Even if you aren't a fan of my decks, but maybe you watch my videos, thank you as well. You might have your own Faded Frontier of imagery from your family, and maybe you'll look at it slightly different now after seeing this. You'll have to let me know in the comments below what you think, and if you have the deck, definitely let me know your experience. And of course, let me know what you love to pair it with. I would love to hear more. And until next time, I will catch you all on the next video. Bye.